All right, so a couple of books that I read when I was, really getting into finance, getting into real estate, and started kind of thinking of working on my own, kind of doing my own thing. And essentially that's what a mortgage banker, mortgage broker is doing. We are 100% commission. We're kind of doing our own thing. So we still have to have some kind of leadership, right? And so I think a book that helped me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This was a book that just helped show two different paths, not a wrong and a right path, but two different paths. And then it also lets you see kind of individuals that you might be working with, that might be your neighbors, that have chosen one path or the other, that are used as examples in the book. And I'll tell you, the path of the rich dad, for example, is not a path for everyone. And so you really have to kind of think, is this something I would want to do? And it helps you to reflect. And I think that book helps jog those emotions up. So that's certainly something I would recommend. The second book, which I think everybody should read, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And this is just a motivator. This is a great book to help you. Like, if you're just having a hard time getting to that next level, it's one that you can go back to. You may have read it before, but you can go back to it and check it out again, and you're like, whoa, this applies. And it does. It's crazy. It's a book that you, at any time, can kind of go back to, relook at it, and learn something new from it. It's just one of those. And then I think a book that I've loved and that has definitely stayed true through all the years, I read it in the early 2000s, and it's The Millionaire Next Door by Stanley Thomas, or by Thomas Stanley. Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. This book was something that I really wanted to read because at that time in the early 2000s, especially in the area that I live in, I saw a lot of people that just went kind of crazy on expenses with the boats and the Hummers and the big crazy houses and all of these things. And I think we're all mesmerized to some degree by the person that's driving the Ferrari or has the crazy boat or whatever, right? But what I also noticed was one of the guys that I was working with is our broker of record at the time. He was loaded, super wealthy, did very well for himself. Drove an older Suburban, had a nice watch, didn't dress super extravagant. He was just kind of an average guy, right? But just totally stress-free. Like, not a care in the world. Like, he was, and that's ultimately what I loved. I was looking at that going. And he actually recommended the book to me. And so it was a different way of looking at things, because you'd be surprised in this field that I'm in, we see behind the curtains. So a lot of times what we all think might be the super well-off family, they could be leveraged. That happens all the time, and it causes stress and all these other things. And so with that book, I learned that sometimes it's just better to live well within your means and put the money aside. And it also kind of tells you the statistics, right? It shocks you on how many people are millionaires that you would never think are millionaires. It's crazy. So those three books I would recommend to anyone that's in this industry, or anyone that's buying a home or getting into real estate or real estate investing. Those are great books. Now, if there were a podcast that I wanted to recommend, I'd probably have to go with David Greene's BiggerPockets podcast. I think he has encompassed investment advice as well as strategic advice, because he's a real estate investor he's also a real estate agent and manages probably the top real estate team in this area. And I know he's also gotten into mortgages too. So I mean, there's just a lot going on there. So he's looking at and involved in real estate in these many different ways. So whereas I help more on a micro level with each buyer with their purchase of their home, and then managing their debt with their refinance, and then referrals to family members and friends and things like that. He's more on a macro level where he's working with investors all over the nation and that sort of thing. So that's the podcast that I'd probably recommend that you check out, is BiggerPockets with David Greene. And yeah, you'll have lots of success. Take care.